Wow, Priya, what can I say?
I'm sure you recognize something in the backdrop, but
Of course.
I'll talk about it at the appropriate time in the interview.
Okay, that is Priya. Everything at the right time, perfect time.
I'm not sure about that.
But you're looking very charming as always, Priya. Seriously.
Thank you.
And I would like to first introduce you formally. Shall we do that, please?
Sure.
So this is Dr. Priya Maholay-Jaradi. She's the senior curator. Sorry, she was a curator. See, this is because we used to work together. So memories. You'll speak about that later, Priya.
Sure.
Senior lecturer and convener at the Art History Department of the National University of Singapore. Yeah, so this is Priya, and of course, there's a lot more to Priya than just this posting at this designation. And I would like to, start off with that, without any further ado. Priya, what is it that brought you into the world of art history? Please elaborate as much as you can, because it's quite an exciting journey that you had.
Okay, so Vidya, I hope I'm allowed time, because that question is going to merit a slightly long response, and I hope that's all right.
That's okay. That's all right.
Okay. So I'd say that I came into the world of art history via the performing arts. So it was my training in Bharatnatyam when I was growing up in Bombay City that actually brought me closer to the realm of visual cultures. I trained under Guru Shri Mani of the Kalasadan Institute of Fine Arts, for anyone who might be familiar with Bombay City and its dance institutes. Now, you see, it was the element of storytelling Vidya which fascinated me. I don't know how modern gurus conduct their lessons, but at least these gurus who came to Bombay in the 1940s and 50s to start out their practice were very particular about narrating the story before beginning the choreography. So that element of storytelling stayed with me, and I'd love to make these sorts of connections between storytelling that went on in a dance lesson and then the way it comes alive, let's say in a sculpture at Khajuraho or a mural at Ajanta. So, during family trips or vacations, I was constantly making that sort of connection between the performing arts and the visual. But I'd still say that it was the performing arts that took me to St. Xavier's College in Bombay to pursue my undergraduate studies. And for anyone who recognizes that space, St. Xavier's is known not just for its academic excellence, but also for its commitment to the performing arts. And during my undergraduate years, I majored with ancient Indian culture and archaeology. And that major subject really introduced me to art history, which I went on to pursue for my postgraduate degree at SOAS in London. So that's how I was introduced to the world and the practice of art history.
And that is such a, I would say it's quite a prestigious academic journey. And it, of course, continued with your PhD at the National University of Singapore as well. And I thought if you could just tell us a little bit about your PhD thesis as well, because that was an exciting one too, isn't it?
Sure. So I'd say that the seeds for my doctoral thesis were actually sown at SOAS. A very fine art historian and mentor, Dr. Giles Tillotson, advised on this thesis, where I combined my interests in dance and the visual arts. So I was primarily examining Raja Ravi Varma's paintings through the lens of Kathakali, Thulal, Bharatnatyam, and even the theatrical traditions in, Bombay and Parsi theatre that was so popular during the colonial times. So I combined my interest in dance and the visual arts in that thesis. And when I was here at the National University of Singapore pursuing a doctoral degree, I thought I wanted to go back to Ravi Varma, but this time not just to him as an artist and his works, but I was deeply interested in unraveling the story of his patrons. And that's how I ended up in Baroda. The thesis was essentially focused on Maharaja Sayajirao Gaikwad III of princely Baroda, which is in Gujarat in Western India. And, back then during the Raj, Baroda was clearly one of the most progressive of all princely states that we had. And what I was interested in unearthing through all these archival files was not just the range of artists or craftsmen who the Maharaja was engaging with or promoting at colonial exhibitions locally or internationally, but I was deeply interested in understanding the kind of political ideologies that underpinned his patronage. And it is widely known that the Maharaja was very committed to India becoming independent. And this commitment to nationalism, to an independent India, is what actually shines through his engagement with art, with artists and craftsmen. So essentially the thesis is about a very progressive Maharaja's engagement as an art collector and patron.
Beautiful. And it's amazing. And I've always admired the way thoughts flow beautifully in a verbal manner through Priya, right? So that is your incredible strength.
You're always very generous, Vidya. I have some things to say about you, but when
No.
the questions come up and when the time is right during the
No,
interview.
not necessary, Priya. You are the focus. You are the queen. Okay.
Wait,
so now,
let me, since we are at Ravi Varma and my work with Baroda, actually,
yeah.
this influence of dance and theatrical elements on Ravi Varma's practice. If you remember, I had presented parts of this
Of
research
course.
at
Yes.
the 10th anniversary of the Jnani Arts
Yes.
Gallery.
Yes.
And that was the time, Jnana, you and the gallery presented me with this beautiful artwork.
Oh wow. I
And this,
didn't expect this, Priya.
I just kind of shifted, I shifted my
You
workstation
see,
for this interview.
you did your curator thing even at this time.
I just thought that this would be the most ideal corner in the house to conduct this interview because the painting symbolizes our professional relationship and of course, a long-standing friendship. So
Beautiful. Thank you for
Thank
that.
you.
Really, I appreciate that a lot, Priya. Well thought, And Priya, actually, I wanted to ask you. Although I didn't really tell you that I'll be asking you about this, but because this is like second nature for you, right? Ravi Varma, the research on Ravi Varma. Could you kindly just tell us a little bit about the research, because it was quite a significant and very detailed research that you had pursued on him. Just a few details that you think that would be a highlight with regards to what he has contributed to the modern art today, contemporary art as well.
Sure. So I think art has been widely established by lots of art historians and scholars. Ravi Varma was an artist who had a pan-Indian presence back then. So, he traveled heavily with his brother, who was his assistant, and also some sort of a manager and, a PR person for Ravi Varma. So, this pair, Ravi Varma and Rajaraja Varma, were traveling across the different princely courts. They had a base in Bombay. They had an apartment for very long in Bombay, along with their base in Kerala, between Trivandrum, Mavelikar, and Kilimanur. So clearly, this was an artist who was itinerant in that sense. Both the brother and the artist were savvy in the sense that they could bag a lot of commissions from the princes, entrepreneurs, other sorts of patrons. In terms of his contribution to art, of course, he did not attend art school. the story goes that he tried to learn techniques of European oil painting from a few artists who were stationed at Trivandrum or Baroda. But he was, I mean, the kind of rivalries that go on between artists, he was probably never let into their studios to learn these techniques of mixing oil colors quite fully. And so there's this long trial and error method in his practice, which also shows up in some of his earlier works. Now, if you go back to the records of that time, a lot of the British officials and art administrators were trying to put out this call that India could have its own genre of history painting, meaning India could have a counterpart to these grand biblical themes and these grand history paintings that you see in the context of Europe. And so I would attribute the creation of this category of history painting or mythological paintings to Ravi Varma and his foremost patron, that is the Maharaja of Baroda. So I'm not saying that there were no other artists who were painting mythological subjects in this style of European or academic realism. There were other artists, but the Maharaja of Baroda had the vision to come in and commission Varma to paint a large series of oil paintings. So it was for the first time that at one go you had a series of, I think, 14 Puranic or mythological compositions that was painted and that was displayed. It was on public display in Bombay for a few days, and then eventually the series was brought to Baroda, and the Darbar Hall was opened once again to the citizens. So I'd say that his key contribution was marrying Indian content, which is, these Indian mythological or Puranic scenes, with the technique of European oil painting. But of course, it's not as if he was mimicking European artists.
Yeah.
He was constantly improvising, and he brought a lot of he brought his own native sensibilities to improvise, for instance, on the jewelry, the borders of the saris, and lots of other details that you see in his work.
Beautiful. Thank you. That was very succinct, Priya. Thank you for that. Right. But Priya, I also want to know your role as a curator throughout your journey. You have done significant work as a curator in the national, in museums, a particular museum, which is the Asian Civilizations Museum, and also at the NUS as well. Am I right? So could you kindly share with us your curatorship experience?
Sure. So I'd have to kind of step back in time, Vidya. Before my engagement with the Asian Civilizations Museum, I was actually introduced to the arena of curating in Bombay. Yes. So when I completed my postgraduate degree at SOAS and returned to Bombay, I worked on this fascinating exhibition which focused on the Parsi Zoroastrian community of Bombay, of India, but more particularly of Bombay, because there's such a high concentration of our Parsi friends in Bombay. And this exhibition was displayed at the National Gallery of Modern Art in Bombay. Now, what was so special about it is that it was the first dedicated exhibition focusing on the Parsi Zoroastrians. And for the first time, we had tons of oil portraits and photographs, which were brought out of private collections. So these were brought out of homes and fire temples for the first time for public display. So that was really my first exposure to curating. I was co-curator on that show, and I have to say I learned a lot from lots of specialists and experts. There were collectors, exhibition designers, other curators. So that was a great opportunity. And thereafter, I moved to Singapore, where, as you know, I was assistant curator at the Asian Civilizations Museum. Yes. And that's where I met you.
Yes,
So,
indeed. Yes.
yeah, so we became friends
Seems
there.
like another yugam, you know. It's like
Yes,
another yugam altogether. Yes.
yes, yes. I think that was between 2005 and 2007. I held that
Yes.
position for 2 years.
Yes.
I was
I
assistant
had the
curator.
privilege of getting to know you. Yeah.
Well, we both had the privilege of getting to know each other. And I remember, I know I'm supposed to be talking about my work, but let me for a little bit tell the members of the audience who've joined in the session about what you did
No,
then.
not necessary.
But you were you were in an important capacity as a research scholar assisting on a publication, and I remember with a lot of discipline and commitment you would come in every morning and work on these translations. There were epigraphs, there were numismatic sources and whatnot, and you went back and forth between Tamil to English and English to Tamil. So I know you
Yes.
were doing
Yeah.
important work.
Oh, thank you
We
so much.
Yes.
So
So
sweet of you to say that. Yeah.
so
Didn't
yes.
expect it once again.
So yeah. So ACM is special. I think we both met there, and again, that was a great experience.
Yes,
Work,
it was. It was certainly.
yeah, Dr. Kenson Kwok was an amazing director who had this eye for detail, and we had some amazing senior curators. So I think Dr. Gauri Krishnan was heading the South Asian collection.
Yes.
Dr. Heidi Tan, who was in charge of Southeast Asia. So I think it was an amazing opportunity to learn with all of you, should I say that?
Oh, yeah. That was an unexpected kiss. Yeah. Priya, I didn't expect all this, but then it is so,
You
so,
know,
so sweet of you to
it wouldn't
do
be
that.
fun if all the questions and everything about this interview would be perfectly curated, right? So we need to have some of these surprises at the back, in the front, and all of that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And I appreciate that. Now back to you. You did some interesting exhibitions at the ACM as well. Just a little bit on that, please. I think you did some on beauty in Asia, something to that
Yes,
effect. Am I right? Yes. And
yes.
some research on Soundarya Lahari as well. Just a little bit about that too, please,
Yeah, so
Priya.
I think ACM was an interesting environment because it kind of opened up the space of curating in terms of cross-cultural comparisons, right, or comparative approaches within Asia. And I worked on this special exhibition, Beauty in Asia, which was this kind of a cross-cultural survey or investigation into how notions of beauty translate differently across cultures. So it
Right.
might mean something in Chinese culture, it may mean something else in the Sanskrit texts, in Mughal manuscripts.
Yes.
So I think this was a very interesting special exhibition, and it involved lots and lots of lending agencies and museums and private collectors who came forward to, to lend their works. And then the other large exhibition there that I worked on with Dr. Krishnan was on the Nalanda Trail.
Okay.
And this was essentially in the context of the revival of the Nalanda University. So it was, really revisiting Buddhist sites across
Yes.
Asia and the journey of Buddhism across Asia. So yeah, these were the two main projects that I worked on while at ACM.
Wonderful. And they were well received as well.
Yes, I think both the exhibitions did well. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Priya. Beautiful answers that you have given, more than what I expected, but that's what you are, and wonderful. All right, Priya, I want to know more about you with regards to the area of art history, because that's your specialization, and you have been dealing with various facets of art history. Of course, art history is another universe altogether, right? There's so many specificities, so many aspects, whether it's cultural or social, so on and so forth. So just putting it, I'm asking you in a generic manner. It's up to you if you want to answer it specifically or generically. And how relevant is art history to current art making practices?
Okay. So, Vidya, let me split this question
Okay.
Let me first talk about art history's relevance. So, art history is still considered a gateway discipline or almost a prerequisite for a career in museums. So, if you're looking to be a curator, art history is important. There has been some controversy over this in the last 3 to 4 years, where two directors of a museum in the Euro-American world went up on the stage at the Frieze Art Fair and declared that art history had become obsolete to a museum career, especially if you're curating contemporary or modern art. But I think most of us in the community globally do not agree with this stance,
Yes.
because even if you're curating something contemporary or modern, you have to understand how it fits into that very long lineage of artistic traditions, right? Which start with prehistoric art going all the way to modern and contemporary art of today. So art history does remain a gateway discipline to a career as a curator. But if you're talking about art making in terms of being an artist, then I suppose the typical recommendation always is a fine arts degree, right? A bachelor or a master's in fine arts. But having said that, the good fine arts degrees will almost always expose their students or their candidates to basic modules in art history. So there will always be a few survey courses, a survey of global art, Asian art, and again, this is with a view of with a view to educate the artists on this long lineage of artistic production, as we've said, because as an artist, you need to know what is it that you are reconfiguring, reusing, redeploying from past traditions, and how are you incorporating new meanings. For instance, if you're using motifs from Islamic calligraphy or manuscript painting traditions or modern art or Picasso, you need to know what is it that you are furthering or overturning. So I think either which way, either directly through an art history degree or via a practice-oriented degree, a fine arts degree, art history is important.
It's very beautifully said, and that too in a very academic manner. But
I
I want to ask you.
I hope it was not too academic, but the idea is to reach
Priya,
out.
I'm going to trying to get to you. No, we need that academic manner. That is very important, Priya. But the reason why I distinctly said academic is because there's another side of you whereby you actually deal with real artists, and you have artists as friends, and you watch them work, and so on and so forth. But in
Yes.
that personal art making scenario that you have seen, for example, no, I think I wouldn't want to give examples. You would know who you would want to think of in this context. What has it been? How has it been like for you watching artists paint, and what does it do to you? I mean, do you enjoy doing that? I mean, looking at a piece of art is one thing, but looking at the process is another thing altogether. So just a few thoughts about it, please. Just
Oh,
your
yes.
opinion.
Yes, definitely. I enjoy watching artists at work. It's an amazing experience to engage with artists over a prolonged period of time, to revisit their works, to do interviews, and of course, to see the process of growth. The manner in which they think, the manner in which they are engaging with other artistic traditions or practices, or wrestling with them. It's always a very interesting process. um, I just before the pandemic in January, I did this interview with the British Nigerian artist Yinka Shonibar, who was here as part of the Singapore Arts Festival. So I don't know if you and Nyana had the opportunity to see his works at the old Parliament House, but it was a brilliant. It was a brilliant usage
Okay, we
of
missed it. Yeah.
batik and African commercially produced textiles,
Okay.
and lots and lots of ideas behind those works. I followed Jnana's practice as well. And it's always amazing to see, how the biographical bears on his work, his growing up years in South India, and then, how things have changed around in his practice, um, let's say in the last few years. So it's always an interesting uh, process as a curator and a scholar to follow an artist over a prolonged period of time,
Yes, indeed.
as opposed to a one-off studio visit. I'm not sure that I'm a big fan of those kind of one-off interviews or studio visits. I
You're
just
right. Yeah,
I hope
I
that
agree with you. I mean, if one is especially, I mean, if it's just for the sake of writing an article, I guess there's not much of a choice, but to do it within a day or so. But then, of course, if you are meant to write a book or so on and so forth, it takes time, and that's what you do typically with your book publications. And actually, that's what I'm coming to as well. And I thought this is a perfect time. It's not supposed to be the next question though, but it's the perfect time because we are coming into this research element. And I request you to give us an introduction, please, to some of your significant book publications.
right.
You have done a few already, which have been well received. So just a little bit about them as well, please.
So I think the most significant in terms of the time invested and the results that I would have reaped from the book would be the monograph and the edited volume on Baroda. So I have a single author book on Baroda, and there is an edited volume book. So let me talk about the single author
Yes,
work
please.
that comes
Yeah.
first chronologically. So that is essentially a culmination of my doctoral work. It is the thesis, which is turned into a book by Oxford University Press. And as I've said in summary, it is not just about the artists or the artisans who the Maharaja of Baroda supported or patronized, but it is also about how he used this whole apparatus of art collecting and of exhibitions to be able to promote ideas of nation building or ideas of freedom and independence. So it's a lot about political ideas that underpin the Maharaja's collecting practice. That is, the single author book by Oxford University Press.
Okay.
But that, you see, that work, Vidya, focuses on the colonial period. So it starts out in the 1870s and ends around 1920s. Now, what I wanted to do after finishing that manuscript and once it went to press, I thought it was important to bring the Baroda story up to date. So to ask questions about what happens after the 1920s. You know, this wonderful and solid foundation that is laid out by the Maharaja and his political ideas, where do they go after the 1920s, and how do they evolve, if at all, in modern art institutes or contemporary institutes and training colleges in Baroda, or artistic practice in Baroda. So of course it would have been impossible for me to to bring that story up to date. So I invited about 10 other very well-established scholars, curators, and practicing artists who worked on Baroda as a subject.
Right.
And each of them contributed a chapter, and we managed to publish this volume with Marg Publications, which is supported by the Tata Group in Bombay.
Yes.
And of course, for anyone who has seen publications by Marg would know the quality. They're really big.
Of course, yes.
Stations, excellent production quality. So, that's turned out to be a very, very fulfilling project. So these
Indeed,
are the
yes.
significant books, if I may. Yeah.
Yes, significant, and I think they can be considered as seminal works, isn't it, Priya? As in, it's
I will
sorry, Priya.
I will leave it to the reviewers and other scholars out there to assess, how seminal the works are.
Okay, let's leave it to the audience, certainly. And well, I consider them to be seminal works. So for what it is worth, right? So my 2 cents worth. That
Thanks,
is.
thanks, Vidya.
Thank you for that beautiful answer once again, Priya. And there's something that I wanted to ask you. To ask you, in your opinion, actually, in your opinion, is there something or any aspect that is lacking within the manner in which art history is being taught in general and in Singapore?
Okay, so let me sort of give the kind of big picture, the global picture first, and then come
Sure,
into Singapore, if that's all right.
sure. That's okay.
So, art history has traditionally been a discipline of the Euro-American world. It's been taught there from the 1700s, or, at least the foundational writings of the field were conceived of as early as the 1700s. Now, earlier writings in the field or earlier methods of teaching were from a very, very European or an American perspective. So we refer to that as a Eurocentric art history.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're asking me about, our moment in time today globally, I think it's
Yeah.
a very exciting time in the field, both for teaching and the manner in which we are thinking through the discipline, because we are, all of us in the field are aspiring to what we refer to as global art histories. And so this kind of shift between the Eurocentric to global art histories, what does it mean? Let me unpack this for you. We're
Sure.
basically we're basically aspiring towards a more inclusive discipline, so that the Asian and the African world, or Asian and African geographies that were excluded earlier, are all part of art historical study and inquiry. Minor or vernacular art traditions, which were not strictly studio based, are also now increasingly becoming a part of art historical study. I mean, earlier, one thought these were not worthy of study in the field. But now we're increasingly looking at vernacular and minor traditions. And then third, there's also this very strong commitment to bringing in gender, race, color, these sorts of issues in.
Yes.
So in that sense, we're aspiring to a very, very inclusive space, both in terms of the way we teach and the way we write as scholars or authors. So I do think it's a very exciting moment globally. And coming to Singapore, I think our museums, right? Whether you look at the India Heritage Center, Asian Civilizations Museum, the National Gallery, Singapore, all of them are aligning with this shift, with what we call a very revisionist turn.
Right.
So they all, the way in which they exhibit, display, or curate exhibitions, they're reassessing uh, older categories or older works of art. So for instance, if it's an exhibition about raffles, if it's about Indian heritage, or if it's about modern art, all these galleries and centers are coming in to think through these topics or these themes differently, from an Asian perspective rather than a European or an American perspective. So I think the curatorial climate is really very exciting, and that in turn lends itself to all our art history programs that run island-wide. So whether it's NTU, LaSalle, Yale NUS, or even our own program at NUS, which is in partnership with the National Gallery Singapore. And of course, we have our University Museum, the NUS Museum, also as a partner. These partnerships or collaborations translate very meaningfully in our teaching, because on a day-to-day basis, through our classes, we're constantly demonstrating to the students as to how the theory that is learned in class, art historical theory, how is it applied in curatorial practice, and vice versa? How do exhibitions or displays in turn inform, this whole aspiration of producing a global or an inclusive art history. So I think it's an exciting time globally and in Singapore.
You don't really, that, which means that you feel that it is fulfilling, and it does, you don't really see something very predominantly lacking in this scenario. So it's quite fulfilling. You think so? In your opinion, like this is how it should be, and since there's an evolution and there's a sense of inclusivity, and that's the way to go. Am I right to? Am I right to?
Okay, so at the moment, the way a lot of these programs are tailored and the direction in which we are moving is right. If you're talking about what is lacking, I'd say we kind of need to turn it around. What was lacking? So,
Right,
we
yes.
had, for instance, a fully dedicated art history program or a curriculum came into place quite late at NUS. But this does not mean that art history was not taught prior to the launch of our program in 2017. So I think the way it works, in the 1950s, we had the University Art Museum and the university running an art history program all the way till the 1970s. Now, after this, the program was closed, but we've had lots and lots of art history modules or modules that talk about visual cultures, which were distributed across different departments, right? So what changes after 2017 is that these modules are consolidated in a proper curriculum.
Right,
And
okay.
also have new partners and new collaborations, for instance, with the National Gallery, and more active collaboration with the NUS Museum.
Yes.
And we've added new modules. So we have a consolidated curriculum where students can actually opt into art history as a subject. So that's the difference.
That's wonderful. Yeah, yeah, and I'm so glad that such a thing is happening at this point in time, and to know that you have contributed greatly to it as well is another added value. Priya?
I think it's a collaborative effort, Vidya. Let's put it that way.
Certainly. Yes, of course, yes. And well, like you said, that was one major, this major aspect that was really lacking. As you said, the art history, art making, one can't escape from history and tradition. So to have this excluded for a very long time was quite saddening. But
to add to that, so though we have art history now, we still don't have a practice-based curriculum. So we don't have fine arts, right? So we have practice-based modules over at Yale NUS, but not at NUS. So you're right. There are these gaps which need to be addressed with time.
Absolutely. And we will give it time. Why not? Thank you for that beautiful answer once again, Priya. And I would like to go back to your research, actually. Please give us a brief insight into the current research that you're undertaking. Is there another book in the making, Priya?
I wouldn't call it a book, Vidya. It's a paper, perhaps a standard journal article. So it could inform a future book. I don't know, too soon to say. But I'm working on this project with the NUS Museum.
Okay.
So the university's own museum. And the NUS Museum had received a donation of artworks from the government of India way back in 1959. It was not even known as the NUS Museum then. It was known as the University of Malaya Art Museum, because we were part of an undivided federation at that time.
Yes.
So essentially, this project digs up the paper trail and the archival correspondence between Singapore, New Delhi, to figure out the motivations that were underlying this gift-giving act. Why does this amazing donation of objects come into the NUS Museum in 1959 is a question to be asked. And the approach that I'm taking towards this work, I mean, of course, quite obviously, the donation is a symbol of India and Singapore's cultural diplomacy, right? Diplomatic ties. But the idea is to kind of, go beyond that narrow space of cultural diplomacy to think through some bigger events that were unfolding in the backdrop. So, I am looking at the moments from the close of the World War. Then, of course, you have a new war, you have the Cold War, and you have lots and lots of African and Asian nations which are fast gaining independence. So there is this climate of decolonization and solidarity and brotherhood between Asian nations or African and Asian nations. So the hope is to try and bring those developments to see how they might bear on this gift-giving act that happened in 1959. So this is this should turn into an article, but primarily it is part of the NUS Museum's anniversary lecture series, which happens about every 2 years, and it was scheduled for August this year, but given the pandemic situation, we don't know. Yeah, but I'll keep you posted.
Let's see. Yes, of course. We have to know, keep each other posted. I mean, this is an intriguing subject that you're working on, and I always feel that you have this when it comes to research, there's this thing, the notion of gifting has been very much part of your research, whether it is the King of Baroda or now India to Singapore. Have you got something to say about that, Priya? Is that a pure coincidence?
I think it's a coincidence, Vidya, but if I had to kind of find a common denominator across my projects, I mean, you call it gift giving, but I think I'm the sort of art historian, I'm interested, to come in on my research through the archives. Yes. So I absolutely delight, in working in record rooms, repositories, archives. Yes. They don't have to be the posh locations in London. They can be provincial record rooms across cities and states, wherever in the world. But really, working with the archives, mobilizing the archives to try and understand, art history or to write art histories is something that excites me. So I think that is probably the common denominator.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, lovely to hear that. That even that is conceptualized. The way that you have answered this question is on its own a concept. I hope you know what I mean, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So Priya, there's one thing, I'm going to take you away from your artistry and curation, so on and so forth. And I want to ask you something that you may not have expected. I want to ask if you would be going into dance again. Would you, Priya?
Wow. That's an enormous question, Vidya, which would require enormous amounts of thinking and preparation. I have to give it to my husband, who's also been encouraging me and telling me to get back. But, well, the reality with dance is that, it requires that kind of stamina. It involves the body. So it would require enormous preparation to come back in that way. Well, but thank you for the question. Yeah, who knows? It might prompt me to think through it. Thank you for the question.
Yeah. By the way, when you talk, I actually see you dance. So it's just too much part of you, too much of an aspect that's synonymous with you, I believe. So one fine day, maybe one margam, just something for us, one fine day, and I will come with my camera to document that.
Thank you, Vidya. Thanks for the question, because as I've said, it may lead me on the path to at least start thinking about it. Thank you.
Yes, please do. And then we have come to a halt, actually. I would like to continue this conversation, this beautiful conversation with you on another platform, on another day. It's been such an enriching, nourishing very educational session with you. Insightful is the right word, actually, more than educational. It was insightful, well thought out answers, very responsible answers that you have given as well, Priya, and it is very commendable, and I'm extremely proud of being associated with you as well, Priya. And I thank you for your time and your energy and effort to be with us today.
Well, before you sign off, Vidya, let me take the opportunity. Let me thank you for this brilliant opportunity that's allowed me to reflect. Honestly, when you approached me, I thought you were putting me on a pedestal. We have a lot of senior scholars out there. But really, thank you for the opportunity. And I do want to thank you for your collegiality over all these years. And of course, for being a wonderful friend. Thank you, Vidya.
Oh, thank you so much, Priya.
And congratulations to you and Nyana for, this wonderful model that is an art gallery that is into teaching art, and also, conducting these kinds of platforms which connect people and bring all of us together. So really, thank you for everything and congratulations. I wish you luck in all your endeavors.
Oh, thank you so much, Priya, and I wish you a long, blessed, joyful life for you and your family as well. Thank you very much. Sorry, dear.
Let me also thank all the people who've taken the time out to join this session. Now, I'm sorry that, this kind of virtual platform does not allow us to meet, but really, I can see your mugshots, and thank you all. Thank you.
Yes, very important. Thank you very much for everyone who has been patient.
I can see lots and lots of people on the screen who I know, many who I don't know, which is even more gratifying.
So now you know that you have quite a fan club, right? Isn't it, Priya?
I think that would be, the Jnani Art Gallery's fan club, not mine.
No. A lot of yours too. Believe me, I'll talk to you later about it. Yeah.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Priya. Take good care. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Stay healthy.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you, dear. Bye-bye.